Well, it could be, and that doesn't bode well for Doug Peterson if it's going to happen for the next 24, 48 hours, obviously, because he's still got work to do this weekend, and that would point more toward probably Ben McAdoo than anything else.
Can they hire him before his season ends? Can they make an agreement in principle?
Well, they can make a wink-wink deal, but they can't announce it until after the season is done. So, but certainly, Bob Lamont is the agent of Doug Peterson. He's Howie Roseman's agent. He's Andy Reid's agent. So it's not like they don't know each other. It's not like they could have something done. But as far as moving quickly officially, as some people are stating could happen, that would point towards McAdoo. And as I tweeted today, it might come down to the Giants and Eagles fighting for this guy. And to be blunt, I don't get it. I don't get it. So for the people who don't like Doug Peterson, and I'm not enthralled with this entire coaching search, to be honest. I think the best domino landed in Cleveland today, and the Eagles didn't even interview him, and that's Hugh Jackson. If the Giants and Eagles are going to fight over this guy, I have to question it from both sides.
Well, McAdoo, his name has come up a lot in the last couple of days. He seemed like they just kind of interviewed him and then just kind of went away. And now some people believe he has emerged as a top 1 or 2 candidate. Where does Coughlin fit in if McAdoo gets hired any place? I mean, is Coughlin still in the mix as a head coach with McAdoo coming here? Is McAdoo going to New York and Tom Coughlin still a possibility in Philadelphia?
I don't think so. In fact, from an Eagles perspective, I think it looks more and more like they brought in sort of Tom Coughlin to answer questions about Ben McAdoo and do their due diligence that way. I think, San Francisco losing out on Hugh Jackson, I think that was their top choice. And all of a sudden he interviewed out there. So they're going to have to choose somebody. San Francisco, which is a very dysfunctional organization now. And who knows, even Chip Kelly might enter into that conversation. Tom Coughlin possibly in San Francisco is a short-term fix. But from the Eagles' vantage point, it looks like they brought in Tom Coughlin to pick his brain about Ben McAdoo and what he's capable of doing. And I just point to the fact I understand this is not fantasy football. We talked about it, Mike. I don't care if Eli Manning's statistics are better under Ben McAdoo. I think he limited his effectiveness as a player. I think his strengths are getting the football down the field, and he kind of took that off the table. And I take a step back and I look at the New York Giants over the past 2 seasons. They were a worse football team. Now, if you want to blame that on Tom Coughlin, go right ahead. But Ben McAdoo was part of that. And I didn't see very much good football from the New York Giants since Ben McAdoo's been there.
Yeah, and it was reported yesterday, John, that the Eagles basically have ended their search, that these candidates are the ones, that they're going to regroup, assess its options after the owners' meetings this week. So it looks like it's going to be one of these guys, and I don't know that there is an attractive option of the group. And it seems that the Doug Peterson, Pat Shurmur, those 2 guys are more likely a trip down memory lane to try to restabilize what you used to have.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad way to go, because I think you mentioned before I came on the people who don't like Andy Reid personally. Well, it was pretty good here. I often talk about the 10 playoff wins, and you can talk about not big wins. I think by definition any playoff win is a big win, so I'll argue that. But beyond that, it hasn't been nearly as good. I can say that since Andy Reid is gone. So I think a back to the future mentality wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, whether it's Shurmur, Peterson. But you're right about the Eagles. They've finished interviewing now. Doug Peterson confirmed that when he was talking today in advance of the Patriots-Chiefs playoff game. Now, they can always regroup and say, we're not happy with any of these candidates and restart it again. But this has been a strange search one, because you remember when Jeffrey Lurie was explaining the strange timing of the Chip Kelly firing, his first assessment was we wanted to get a head start. We wanted to get a head start. And what did that mean? That brought bringing in Adam Gase 8 hours and wanting to talk to him again. Now the spin coming out of Novacare is, we weren't really that interested with him. And the fact that he took the Miami job, which is dysfunctional, proves that we weren't interested in him. Well, as I and he's talked about it in his press conference, when they asked him what's Mike Tannenbaum's selling point, he said 75 degrees and no state taxes, which I brought up was going to be a big, big thing, a big hurdle to overcome. It always is when you're dealing with teams in Florida fighting for the same talent, be it coaching, free agency, what have you. And Adam Gase is obviously in Miami. This has been not good. It's the best way I can describe it. When you talk about a team that's going back to Howie Roseman after taking his power away and then taking a step back and giving it back to him, this whole process does not look good for this brain trust of the Philadelphia Eagles.
It's interesting because I opened up the show today, John, by going back to that firing, and you're trying to connect some of the dots and all of the stuff that's out there that anybody else, and they're going to regroup. It almost seems like that they didn't have a plan the day they fired Kelly. It was almost like a knee-jerk reaction. We offered Kelly to be just the coach, and he said no, and it's almost like they're shocked by that. So then they fired him and didn't have anywhere to go because, as you said, they wanted to jump out in front of this, but their actions have not spoken to that.
Exactly. And we talked about that a little bit yesterday, and the fact that even though Jeffrey Lurie claimed he didn't offer Chip Kelly a chance to stay by taking away personnel power, we both heard people behind the scenes say the exact opposite and said he was given that opportunity and turned it down. And that speaks to his fractured relationship with Howie Roseman, because he is willing to do that in another city with a different general manager. Those two just couldn't get along on a personal level. So I do believe it was sort of a spur of the moment, the firing. And everything since then has been spin, starting with we wanted to get a head start. I believe the Eagles had a strong interest in Adam Gase. No matter what they say, keeping him for 8 hours indicates that. And obviously, once you lose out on a candidate, you don't want to spin it as that's the guy we wanted. And now we move on. They go out to Kansas City to interview Doug Peterson. It could be as simple as they don't want to wait because all of a sudden the dominoes start to fall. This has always been an issue in this league, coordinators from very, very successful teams, because it takes a strong organization to wait out a very good team. And you see it year after year after year. Once the hiring start coming, all of a sudden there's a lot of pressure from the media, from the fan base, and it's very difficult to wait. And I'm not sure the Eagles are strong enough to do that right now. And that might be why they're trying to speed this process up. And obviously that's not good long term. But when you look at the candidates that have been interviewed, I'm not impressed with any of them, to be honest. To me, it's the best of a bad lot, and that would be Peterson or Shermer.
Yeah, and Mike Silver tweeted from the NFL Network that if you were a Eagles fan who wanted Hugh Jackson, your team at least put a call in, albeit very late in the process. He also tweeted about the Giants. He said, if you were a Giants fan who's disappointed your team didn't get Hugh, where were the Giants for the first 8 days of their search? So maybe that there kind of shows that the Eagles were panicking a little bit and still don't have an idea of where they want to go. So they make a late call to Hugh Jackson, but too late in the game.
Yeah, and Silver is very close to Hugh Jackson. They're personal friends. So that's 100% correct, and you're right. Why did it take them so long? And people have been talking about this guy as one of the most impressive candidates in this group, and yet the Eagles didn't bring him in. They interviewed Deuce Staley right away to sort of satisfy the Rooney Rule. We spoke about that. They floated Hugh's name, but never went to contact him until the very end when the Browns already locked things down. It's just another example of clearly this search has been fractured. All three guys, Lurie, Roseman, Smolinski, are not on the same page. It's evident. I have two sources who said one of the three certainly wasn't Lurie, so that knocks it down to 50%. Was all on board on Gase and wanted to bring him in, couldn't convince the other two. So this, to me, is a very, very fractured process, and it's continuing that way. And I'm not sure this whole collaborative effort that they've talked about and was the issue with Chip Kelly is certainly not working well in the early days.
For more on the Eagles coaching search, John McMullen has stuff at 97.3 ESPN.com on Doug Peterson. The Tom Coughlin stuff, in which you wrote about the other day, is Jeffrey Lurie behind the Coughlin interest? And, is Jeffrey Lurie's voice keeping Coughlin in the race?
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's the only reason he got an interview here. It's not a typical sort of Philadelphia Eagles interview. They look for a certain thing, and they want shelf life. And if you think about it, everybody talks about that, not just the Eagles. They want the next guy who's going to be an Andy Reid level 14-year, 15-year level coach, and that's just not realistic. The average shelf life for a coach in the NFL is under 5 years. It's about 4.5 years. So this whole swinging for the fences all the time, I don't know if that's a great idea. If you like McAdoo that much, people have floated the idea to bring in Coughlin short term to continue to groom McAdoo and bring them in as a pair. I would like that better than just elevating Ben McAdoo. But I also point to this all the time. If there's one team during the Chip Kelly era that the Eagles completely dominated, it was the New York Giants. I do not understand this fascination with what has been going on up the Turnpike, because it hasn't been a very good football team over the past 4 years.
Yeah. Interesting, because Hugh Jackson said he wasn't looking for leverage. He wasn't looking for offers. He just was waiting for someone to say, "You're my guy." And he said the Browns just made him feel the most comfortable. That's a sad state for the other teams that he was interviewing with. But Hugh Jackson was scheduled to fly to New Jersey tonight to meet with the Giants. The Browns made sure he didn't get on the plane, and that's something you were talking about last week with Adam Gase. The Eagles let him go. He ends up going to Miami and getting a new contract with the Dolphins. The Browns would not let him get on that plane, and Hugh Jackson is now the new head coach in Cleveland. So some interesting stuff at the last minute there with Jackson, that, the Giants could have been in the mix. The Eagles could have been in the mix, and he ends up going. Would he have been the best candidate, John? Of all the guys, does Hugh Jackson excite you the most?
Yeah, he did, and I've mentioned that. Certainly offensively. I think Sean McDermott, who's not even in the conversation, but the Eagles don't think about things any longer in a defensive mindset. So those were my first two from square one. I think offensively he's light years ahead of Doug Peterson and Ben McAdoo as far as the offense he runs, the formations, the advanced way he does things. And you saw the success he had with Andy Dalton in Cincinnati before he got injured this year. He's just a very, very good offensive football coach. And the fact that both of these teams drug their feet on this particular guy, it's one of the things that has had me shaking my head. And then when they try to get him in the last minute, the Giants scheduled an interview, as you mentioned. The Eagles reportedly made the phone call. What took you so long? I mean, if you look at the resumes of Adam Gase, Doug Peterson, Ben McAdoo, and you put it next to Hugh Jackson, it's not close. It really isn't. So now that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a tremendous success. This is the eighth head coach in Cleveland since 1999. So he's behind the eight ball to begin with in that organization. And if you truly believe in a Gase, or you truly believe in a Peterson or a McAdoo, that's fine. But I don't understand the dragging of the feet. What is taking so long? If you want to look at a guy and say, hey, Ben McAdoo is going to be the next coaching star of the NFL, well, you may be 100% right. but you don't have the courage of your convictions because you're tap dancing around. This isn't like the Chip Kelly search where you said, this is the guy. We're going out and getting him. It didn't turn out to be right, but you don't see this time around. And maybe it is the gun shyness from being wrong on Chip Kelly. But I certainly don't see overwhelming support for any of these candidates, and it's going to be tough to sell any of them at this point because of the way the Eagles have handled it.
All right, John McMullen at JF McMullen with more on the Eagles and, of course, 97.3 ESPN.com. As things happen with the Eagles coaching search, John will be on it. And, of course, we'll talk to John tomorrow at this time. Will we be talking about the next coach? We'll see. Thanks, John.
Hey, thanks, Mike.